Hey guys, Mr. P here again. Hope you had a great weekend. So we're gonna just launch right into the notes, just get them out of the way quickly. We're gonna do notes today, like lecture, PowerPoint today, Monday, Sunday for me, Monday for you. Tuesday, tomorrow, we'll do another, we'll finish like all the notes from chapter 5. Wednesday, we're gonna have like a day, it's either gonna be a Q&A day or I'll just give you guys some small reflection assignment to do and leave the rest of the time for you to study. And Thursday will be a quest. You heard it right, a quest, Q-U-E-S-T. That's in between a quiz and a test. It's because chapter 5 is not too much information, but enough where it's too much for a quiz. So it's going to be a 30-point, 15-question quiz. Normally your quizzes are 20 points. This quiz will be on Thursday. It'll be a quest because in between a quiz and a test. It'll be worth 30 points and 15 questions instead of 10. And after that, next week, we're going to do a short little segment on demonology. I hope you like that. That'll be pretty fun. Okay, so let's get right into it. So, share screen. Okay, so last week, Thursday and Friday, we talked about a bunch of different things. We talked about, let's see here, first king of Israel. That's Saul, cycle of apostasy, you know, how they would keep sinning and then asking for forgiveness, and they would be saved after they got invaded by a judge that God would send them after they asked for forgiveness. Remember, a judge is an Israelite military hero. Saul becomes known as the first king. And then David's like the glory days of Israel, does a great job, okay? Saul tries to compete for the throne. He goes crazy. He kills himself. Also, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of it's not a dry cough, so I don't think it's coronavirus. It's like a normal, you know, in the throat kind of thing, wet cough, if that's even a thing. Okay, so David does a couple great things. He unites the 12 tribes of Israel. He makes Jerusalem Israel's capital, and he takes the Ark and the Covenant. They just had a tent there pulling around and puts that in Jerusalem. The prophet Nathan tells David then that because he's doing such a great job, his descendants will always rule Israel. There's going to be a line of descendants from David that will always like at least have a part to play in Israel. And then the Messiah will come from his line. And weirdly enough, you guessed it, Jesus, he comes from David's line. Now, not directly father-wise, because remember, Jesus' father was God. He didn't have a biological father, but Jesus' foster father was Joseph, who was a descendant of, yep, King David. It all makes sense. Okay, that's known as the Davidic covenant. All right. You think Israel's going to do great, but no, it falls apart because not only does David have a pretty big sin we're going to talk about today, his son Solomon becomes king. At first, they're doing amazing. It's the most powerful it's ever been. He takes many foreign wives, and then these foreign wives are into all kinds of stuff, weird gods. He builds shrines to those gods, which lets demons in pretty much, and division and hard times come. Remember, the first thing the devil tries to do is always to divide. Okay, Solomon dies. Kingdom splits in the north and the south. The south holds on to the faith longer. That's the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Those two tribes hold on to the faith longer than everybody else. Those are called Jews, those that are still holding on to the faith. But eventually the south gets invaded as well. Everything's scattered. And 2,000 years ago, these Jews, these are the people that from the tribe of Judah who still held on to the faith, are scattered throughout the Middle East. And Rome is the empire that is in charge of this area of the world. The prophets that you hear about, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Elijah, they are from the south, most of them. Were sent to the southern kingdom, the southern tribe of Judah, to kind of encourage them, say, hey, wait for the Messiah. The Messiah is going to come and reunite everybody. Okay, hopefully you watched that video on the Jerusalem temple. Pretty good. The one that Solomon built. Okay, then you got the split. This is a cool, I think this is where we're at. A cool picture. So it says here, the northern kingdom is ripening in iniquity. That just means they're falling into sin. They are worshiping false gods. A lot of the foreign gods that Solomon let in, these 10 tribes up here in the north, they like mix them with worship of God, and you can't mix God and other religions. It doesn't work. The southern kingdom, Judah, where Jerusalem is, and also Benjamin, they are holding on to the faith better, but they are not far behind, meaning like they're slipping too, and eventually they get invaded, I think like 50 years after the north does, or something like that. Okay. So now that we're done the story of ancient Israel, and we know that they're scattered as you know around the time of Jesus, 2,000 years ago, that Israel does not actually become a successful country. We're going to take some really cool stories from the Old Testament, stories from Israel that we can learn from to help our own spiritual lives. I'm going to go through a couple of them today. The first one is King David's sin. Now, King David, like I said, was the greatest of Israel's kings, nowhere near perfect. He had a really good heart. He had a lot of great moments where he did a lot of great things for God. As I said before, he had the opportunity to kill Saul when Saul was hunting him down, and he didn't. So he was really good, right? But he had one huge sin, which cost him a lot, and we'll go into that. So here's what happened. So David's king, his troops are out in battle. I forget who they were fighting. It might have been like the Amorites or something like that. I can't remember exactly who they were fighting. But they're fighting. And Uriah is a general of David's, a really, really smart, really dedicated, really good guy, one of his best generals, all right, out in the war fighting on the front lines. Now, what happens is David is on his rooftop in Jerusalem. That's mistake number one. Not a big deal, but King David is supposed to be out there leading his troops in battle, and he's not. He's chilling on his palace, just stretching out while his troops are out there fighting. Normally, he's a good warrior. Normally, he would be out there, but that's mistake number one. He wasn't really in the right place. Not really. That can happen to us, right? Like maybe you don't commit a grave sin, but you're kind of not in the right place. Maybe you find yourself at a party on Saturday night you're not supposed to be at. I'm going to warn you right now, when this quarantine ends, a lot of people in high school are going to try to let loose. They were cooped up for a while, and a lot of sins are going to happen. Please avoid those kinds of sins once this quarantine ends. You don't want that on your soul. It's never worth it, right? So maybe it's you at a party. You're not doing anything horribly wrong, but you're in a spot you really shouldn't be at, okay? That's David right there. He's on his rooftop overlooking the city in his palace. He should be out in battle. Not doing anything too wrong. He sees Uriah, the general, who's out in battle. He sees Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, and she is bathing on her rooftop. Okay, she's taking a bath on her rooftop. She obviously doesn't realize that David is looking at her. Okay, when he sees Bathsheba, he is immediately overcome with lust. He sees her, he begins to lust over her. Now that is the choice he has to make. He can't control seeing her, but what he can do is say to himself, okay, I'm not going to look at that. That is a married woman. That's lust. I'm not going to, even if she's not married, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to get out of this situation. I'm going to make this a whole lot easier on myself and walk back inside. He doesn't. He just zones in and he's overcome with lust. And not only that, he decides he needs to like have her and sends his people to go get her and bring her to the palace. So he brings her into the palace. They both commit adultery. So and she becomes pregnant. So not only did she commit adultery, I guess he's more to blame because he's the king. And I guess in her mind, she could think, well, I got to obey the king or whatever. But he is really to blame here, okay? He just committed, and not only, he committed adultery with a married woman, and not only that, with a woman whose husband is out fighting for him in battle. I mean, this is bad. And she gets pregnant. So first thing he tries to do is cover it up, right? So what's the only way to cover up a pregnancy besides some kind of abortion or whatever, which he didn't do, thank God. What he does is he tries to get Uriah, the general, to come back home so that they have relations, so that everyone will think, hey, it's Uriah's baby, not King David's, right? So he sends a message out to Uriah saying, hey, you're doing a great job out there. Why don't you come home and rest and spend some time with your wife, you know, and you're doing a great job. And unfortunately, Uriah is such a good dude. He's such a good general, a good guy, such a loyal son of Israel, right? That he says to David, no, of course, I could never come home at a time like this. I want to fight for you. I want to fight for my country. When the time comes, you know, in 6 months or whatever, when it's over, then I'll have good family time and I'll enjoy time with my wife and I'll enjoy that then. But for now, I could never think about that. I got to fight for you. So not only did he commit adultery with the wife of the general, but a really, really good general. Okay, so what David does then is he sends Uriah out on a suicide mission, knowing that Uriah is going to be killed, because David starts to get really scared. He's going to think, oh my gosh, people are going to know that she's committed, had an affair. People know she was brought to my palace. He'll find out. If he finds out, it'll be horrible. I can't have him find out. So he sends Uriah out on a mission that only he and a few other generals know is a doomed mission, that they're way outnumbered and they're going to be killed. So he sends Uriah on the doomed mission, a battle that he gets killed in. So let's line up David's sins here. First, it was wrong place, wrong time, or really not being in the right place, kind of putting himself in near occasion to sin. He should be out in battle. Second is not resisting the temptation to lust. Third, not only that, he commits full-on adultery. Then fourth, he tries to lie about it. And then fifth, he eventually commits the sin of murder to cover up the adultery. I mean, so David, as good of a guy as he was and as great of a king as he was, not perfect. And remember, guys, this is before Jesus. The saints after Jesus were amazing. But before Jesus, all they had was the 10 Commandments and the laws. All this love Jesus talks about and salvation and all that kind of stuff, not there yet. So you're dealing with some really sinful people in the whole world, and even in Israel, God's chosen people. You got some crazy stuff going on. That's David. So here's what happens. There is consequences. This baby was conceived in sin, and the baby ends up dying eventually after it's born, I believe, which is really sad. There are consequences for that. It's not that, I don't want to say it's that God punished David and killed the baby. God doesn't do that. Those things don't come from God. But when you give the devil a lot of room to work, sometimes horrible things just happen. I can't really explain it other than that. So here's what happens. The prophet Nathan, good old Nathan. Remember Nathan from who made the covenant with him? Okay, and right sometime before this said to David, "You're doing such a great job. The Messiah is going to come from your line. Your line will always rule Israel." That same Nathan is praying, and he has gifts. God reveals to him what David has done. All right, so so Nathan goes out of his way, talks to David, and confronts him. But he doesn't just go up to him and say, "You did something wrong. I know you committed adultery." He gives David a scenario. He goes, "Hey, David, suppose I told you this." And he describes the exact scenario that David's in. So Nathan says, say some random guy commits adultery, and then he was like, "Yeah, what's the situation?" He goes, commits adultery with a woman that has the woman's husband killed to cover it up instead of owning up to what he did. And David goes, "What?" He goes, "That guy's horrible for covering up what he did. Oh my gosh, and killing the husband, he needs to be killed. That guy needs to be put to death. That's horrible." And you know what Nathan says? Nathan says, "Well, buddy, that's you. You couldn't hide that from God. God knows what you did. He revealed that to me, and that is literally you. You yourself just said you deserve death." When David hears this, he's shaken. He realizes what a horrible thing he did. And he repents. He's deeply, deeply sorry. He fully repents. He spends years, and I'm telling you, years, repenting and crying and fasting for what he did. In fact, the book of Psalms, some of the greatest ancient prayers in the Bible, we think about half of those Psalms were written by King David himself. And many of those Psalms, Psalms of joy, Psalms of praise, Psalms of thanking God for things, and Psalms of sorrow, being sorry. Many of the Psalms that are about being sorry were written right after King David committed this horrible sin of adultery and then murder, and is begging, literally begging God for forgiveness. I believe it's Psalm 51, one of the greatest Psalms you can read. It starts, maybe you've heard of it before, but it starts off like this. Create for me a clean heart, O God. Renew in me a steadfast spirit. And it's really, really all about, like, God, please forgive me. He's begging through tears for years, God to forgive him. So as horrible as this is, what does God do? Of course, God is so loving, he forgives David. There are consequences. The baby did die, because when you give the devil ground to play with it, things are going to happen. But God does forgive David, and Nathan says, even though there's going to be some horrible things that happen in Israel because of your sin, because like that's just what you let evil in, and evil's not going to mess with Israel a little bit. God's promise to you, God never backs down on his promise. The promise God already made to you, he's going to stand firm on that. He's going to deliver. The Messiah will come from your line, and people from your descendants will always rule Israel, and you will always be looked upon as like the golden age of Israel. So here's the moral of that story. There are consequences for sins, right? God set up laws to govern the universe. If I jump out a window, I'm going to fall at 9.8 meters per second squared and hit the ground. If I didn't, then I would never learn not to jump out the window anymore, right? So there are laws that govern the universe that God made. When you sin, there are sometimes going to be consequences, right? But that doesn't mean that God hates you. It doesn't mean that you're doomed. It's God allowing these things to happen to help you change, and he will always forgive you. He'll dust you off. Will get you back up. Don't be discouraged. So many people say, oh, I can't be forgiven. It's what I've done is too much. That is not true. That is not true. King David committed adultery and murder and was still forgiven because he was truly and deeply sorry, fasted, repented, did all kinds of things to show and to purify his soul that he's sorry. God worked with that. Okay, so God will forgive you. You're truly sorry. We'll do one more. The story of Job. Hopefully you watched the video today. But Job is a very righteous, holy guy. Okay, number one, real fast, guys. This many of the stories in the Old Testament actually really did happen. Job, we know, is specifically just a story. It's a poem almost, and we know for a fact it didn't. It's not based on real events, but it's a story that's supposed to be in the Bible. God's trying to teach us something through this story. Okay, this is one of the only books in the Bible where we know it's not based on true events. Most of the other stuff, even Old Testament, probably based on real events. Not Job. Okay. Either way, still from the Lord, still a good story for us to know for our own souls. So Job is a very righteous, holy Jewish guy who avoids evil. He respects God. He hardly ever sins. He's very faithful. Okay. He's financially successful. He's got a good family. Now, it says that God and Satan have like a meeting, right? I'm not going to go through this fast because the video we watched will be really good, but this is what you got to know from the quiz/test. Okay. Satan in heaven, like it's like not in heaven, Satan's not in heaven, but in the spiritual world, we should say, Satan goes up to God and he's like, and God, and they're kind of talking. And now, guys, in real life, God and Satan don't have little buddy conversations. This is a story to kind of show us what each side is thinking, okay? Which is to kind of show us what's going on. God and Satan are not friends. They don't have conversations like this, okay? So anyway, Satan says to God, he says, you know, this guy Job, he thinks he's so holy and you think he's such a good guy. He only likes you because things are going well. The second that things aren't going well for him in his life, he's going to give up his faith. He's going to curse you. He's going to start sinning. He's going to lose his trust in you and he'll never worship you anymore. Right? Now, God says, all right, well, no, his love for me goes deeper than that. You can test him. So Satan says, let me test him. Let me take things away. And God says, okay, just don't hurt him. And he goes, okay. Or just don't kill him or whatever. And Satan says, okay, I'll take everything from him and I'll show you that people only like you because they give you stuff or because you give them stuff. Now, guys, that's something we got to think about. There are so many people that believe in God when things are going well. And then as soon as things are taken away from them or things aren't going well, they give up their faith. That can't be us because that's not the stuff you have is not the most important thing. The most important thing is the love in your heart. So actually, when you lose things, it can be a blessing in disguise because these are different little sacrifices you can offer up to God to increase the love in your heart. That's why this universe exists. That's what's going to get you into heaven. That's the only thing that you're going to take with you after this life ends into eternity is the love, God, how much God love you have in your heart. Every time you lose something, the saints saw it this way. It can actually be a good thing for your soul, right? If you only praise God and you pray to him because he's given you stuff, then you actually only like him because of what he's giving you, which is actually selfishness, right? So, okay, hopefully Job can pass this test. So here's what happens. God allows Satan to make Job's life miserable. He loses his family, loses his fortune, loses his health. Terrible ways, gets boils over his skin. He loses his children in horrible accidents. He loses his whole business. He had a successful farming business or whatever, gone. Everything's gone. Even his wife is like losing it. His wife's like, you need to curse God. His wife becomes bitter, right? And Job, still through all this, he will not curse God. So in order to help him grieve, Job has 3 friends visit him for a long time. At first, they just sit with him for a while, just to let him get his feelings out and just to be with him. Then, once they feel they've sat with him to be good friends and kind of let him absorb and kind of come to grips with what's happened to him because he's grieving. He's so sad. He's crying. He's not cursing God or losing his faith, but he's extremely depressed. Okay, these friends come, and eventually they start saying to him, "You must have sinned." Back then, for the Jews, God never said, things will be perfect for you, only if you didn't sin. But they took it that way for some reason. They thought that if you had bad things happen to you, it was directly a result because of sins you did, right? What do we know now because of Jesus? Well, we know now sometimes bad things just happen because there's sin in the world. Doesn't mean you specifically did it. Sometimes our own sins do cause our problems. Sometimes other people's sins. Sometimes you have no idea who sinned or why or what is causing your problems, but they just happen, right? But back then they thought everything bad that happened to you, you did something to deserve it. So Job's friends say, hey, what have you done? You had to have sinned because, you had to have caused this somewhere. But Job really hasn't. Job's like, no, I really can't think of anything. And they're like, you're full of yourself. How can you not think of something? He's like, no, I really haven't disobeyed God at all. I have no idea why this is happening, right? And that's true. The story says Job really is innocent. So Job becomes extremely hopeless, confused, and depressed, but refuses to give up his faith or to curse God. Okay. Job questions even why he even gets to the point where he's like, God, why do you even allow me to be born? This is a horrible life, right? And then he keeps saying, God, why do you allow good people? Why do you allow bad things to happen to good people? Why do people suffer in general? And him and his friends have these big debates on why they think this happens, okay? Eventually, as in God's silent the whole story. At the very end, God finally speaks, okay? And God doesn't actually say, well, there's sin in the world and these things happen and it'll make you holier through it, because they wouldn't have understood that. We can only understand that kind of stuff because of Jesus. But remember, back in the Old Testament, Jesus hasn't come yet. So we can understand suffering and why we suffer and how much good God will bring out of it way more than Job or someone back then could have understood it. God doesn't even get into that because they wouldn't have gotten it. This is before Jesus. So what does God say? He pretty much just says, trust me. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. All right? So God finally speaks at the end, and he pretty much said, look, man, I'm God. I created the universe. Do you have any idea how complex it is? Humans know absolutely nothing compared to me. You have no idea why I have to allow the things that I allow, how much good it's going to happen. He doesn't say any, he pretty much says, you have no idea what goes into the universe and why these things happen. So just trust me. You can't possibly understand why these things are happening, but I can promise you it's happening for a reason. That's pretty much all God says. And that's good enough for Job. He's like, okay, you're right. I'm not God. I'm not you. I just got to trust you on this. You know infinitely more than I do. So even if I can't understand it right now, I got to trust you. And guess what happens? To explain this, God says he doesn't need to explain himself to us. Like, God doesn't owe us an explanation for why bad things happen to begin with, because our whole existence is a gift, right? Like the fact, even if there's a life of suffering, the fact that you exist is still totally a gift. You know what I mean? And that's like, to question God, like, why'd you let this happen? Why'd you let that happen? Is like, that means it's like I gave you $100 and then I say, you know what, I need to take 20 of those dollars away real quick. I'm so sorry, whatever. And you go, what? Why'd you give me $100? Why? What? Well, I'm still giving you $80 for free. Like, you don't have a right to really question that. You're getting something totally a gift. So for you to start freaking out that it's not 100 anymore, you're just not trusting me that I need that $20 for something else more important, right? That's kind of what's happening. God does not need to explain himself when bad things happen, because everything's a gift from him. And just to prove a point, at the very, very end, God does give Job double his fortune that he had. His business becomes double as successful. He has new children. Of course, the old ones he can never, they're in heaven, of course. But he gets new children. He has new reasons to hope, and he gets a long life because he stayed innocent. He never cursed God and never said, I'm going to just give up and sin, right? So we had to learn from that. When bad things happen, just trust him. He sees the whole picture of your life and all the good that's going to happen in your soul, and how much he's getting you to heaven through these sufferings. He knows why these things have to happen. Even when we don't, just let go, trust him, and don't give up on him, because that's always a mistake. Okay, guys, we will stop there. There's the morals. God sees the whole picture and we don't. Trust God during hard and confusing times, even when you don't understand why he's allowing things. And the last thing is, not all of our suffering is due to our own sins. Sometimes it is. If I get drunk, not that I would, but if I got drunk and fell out a window and broke my leg, that's because of my sin of getting drunk. But not every suffering is because of our own sins, so you can't judge people on their sufferings. If someone's in the hospital, does not mean that they were the one that sinned that caused that. Sometimes they just happen because we're in a fallen world. All right, guys, have a great day. We'll start off with this tomorrow, or we'll continue this tomorrow with the prophet Elijah, as you see there. And hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day and a good week upcoming. Thanks, guys.